Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism, narcissistic abuse, and toxic people and relationships in general. Today I'm going to be talking about something that's been in the headlines, but I think it's useful to sort of frame it in narcissism sort of perspective, because sometimes reading these headlines can give people sort of exemplars. We'll be talking about the Ghislaine Maxwell case, where if any of you have been following that case, it's related to the Jeffrey Epstein case. I'm going to be talking about that and sort of framing that a little to help us understand narcissism. And as always, if you're new to this channel, please subscribe, join us, and you will understand narcissism probably better than you ever wanted to. So let's take this on. The way I'm going to frame this is basically Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein are basically a sick story about a malignant narcissist and the narcissistic enabler. Because narcissists and their enablers so rarely face any form of retribution, there was certainly a sigh of relief when the verdict, at least for now, was handed down on the Ghislaine Maxwell case. Appeals and this messed up juror situation that has come up may still cast this horrible woman free, but for now a jury found her guilty. For those of you not following this case, Ms. Maxwell was a companion, partner, enabler, and facilitator of Mr. Epstein's perpetration, and a perpetrator in her own right, and this was upheld by a jury. Charges included trafficking, abuse of a minor, and while these are legal charges against her, as a psychologist, it is clear that the long-term harm to those who experience the abuses is immeasurable and long-term, even if Maxwell is punished. The Epstein-Maxwell disgustingness is a high-profile example of what happens when a profoundly malignant narcissist has too much money, too much power, and is able to skillfully play people with even more power and money, former presidents, royalty, corporate titans, each one more vile and stupid than the one before, and is then supported by another malignant, enabling narcissist. It is literally the most dangerous combination possible for the vulnerable people in their midst. The Epstein-Maxwell case reminds us that narcissistic abuse is a form of grooming, of seeking out people who may hold vulnerabilities for any number of reasons. In this case, they sought out young women, often from financially unstable homes, so they played upon vulnerabilities of age, social class differences, gender, privilege, and the desperation of economic instability. They then drew them in, abused them, shamed them, and reminded them that nobody would believe their word as a young, broke woman against the word of wealthy, powerful people. It's classical narcissistic grooming as practiced by the rich and powerful. But this dynamic, frankly, plays out in every narcissistic relationship. Draw a person in, manipulate them, shame them, devalue them, imprison them. And if a person tries to leave or seek out help from these relationships, to shame them even further. And a world that would have shamed them because the world is full of enablers. People who have been through narcissistic abuse and other forms of trauma blame themselves. They doubt their judgment. They wonder if they were in the wrong. And sadly, our justice system plays on that, with defense attorneys painting victims as confused, self-serving, and to blame. It is no wonder that many survivors of trauma or narcissistic abuse never seek out help. Most systems will not support them. The courage it takes for a survivor to step forward is monumental. And if the case does end up being adjudicated in a court of law, it's like running a marathon just by coming forward, only to be told there's another 26 miles to go, uphill. The Maxwell case is a bit like the R. Kelly case and the Cosby case. Powerful, wealthy people who were surrounded by enablers at every turn, who were willing to hide and at times assist the perpetration, not talk about it, recruit more victims, and stay silent because it worked for them. I am definitely not willing to become optimistic yet, and enabling is not against the law. But the more and more we are able to bring charge, and convict the enablers. Prosecutors are applying racketeering laws in some cases. In the Maxwell case, though, she was complicit in the abuse, which made it possible to prosecute her. But the more we can address the structures that allow narcissists to hold power and use that power to harm other people. In many of these cases, the enablers are not engaging in behaviors that are sufficient to be legally prosecuted. Basically, they're not breaking the law. Though with the alpha perpetrator gone, it starts to become a hive that has lost its queen bee. I suppose the enablers must find a new cult of personality to follow. Or maybe they thank their lucky stars that they weren't caught, and they skulk off to their own mansions and yachts, where hopefully we never need to hear from them again. Maxwell came from a life of tremendous privilege, with a father who has been variously described as deeply abusive. All biographical accounts of him reveal him to be a cruel, cold, vindictive man. Lots of qualities that are congruent with malignant narcissism. And at the same time, Ms. Maxwell was both the recipient of his cruelty while also being his favorite. Sadly, this case shows us that these are intergenerational cycles. In the circles of the very wealthy, where entitlement is normative, and mix that in with contempt for others who have less and the perceived disposability they have for other human beings, major daddy issues, and an obsession with wealth and power, this was a toxic combination which led to an absolutely horrific situation. Epstein is gone, never to perpetrate again. Maxwell may be locked up for the rest of her life, hopefully never to perpetrate again. However, this is a public case, right? And one a few years ago in which Epstein was tried once. He got barely a slap on the wrist after the trial and went on to perpetrate for several more years. I will say it forever. People like this do not change. Ms. Maxwell appeared defiant to the very end. People like this do not change. For every high-profile case, there are thousands and thousands more happening on a smaller, less public scale. Grooming, entitlement, abuse, and a system that is not designed to bring adequate penalty to perpetrators who use manipulation, devaluation, control, shame, and fostering of doubt to imprison people in a range of situations, not just trafficking situations. The bright side of this, if you can call it a bright side, is that this jury called it out. The defense attorneys for folks like this will forever try to find the technicalities to get people like this off. The rich folks will always be enabled. After all, they do make the rules. But we all need to remember, when the Maxwells and Epsteins of the world come rolling in, whatever form they take, that all the best we can do is to teach ourselves and other people to stay away. But as long as we venerate yacht-riding, jet-owning, high-flying folks like this, it sets a precedent in society that places all kinds of people at risk. And in a story like this, it is easy for the entire focus to stay on Maxwell and not on the women she harmed. They were harmed. They are still harmed. When these cases are tried and a verdict delivered, we then move our attention to the next news story. The people who are harmed by these cases, high profile or no profile, have to live with and work through what happened to them. If they weren't caught, people like Epstein and Maxwell, if they weren't caught, if people hadn't spoken out and some journalist hadn't done the deep dive and put the story out there, Maxwell would have kept perpetrating, as would have Epstein, with their merry band of enablers along, I don't know, I guess for the free vacations, and who were conveniently able to look the other way, or because they operate in spaces where malignant narcissism is so ubiquitous, or maybe in some cases because they were complicit. These folks, Maxwell's, Epstein's, anyone like them, they would have kept going in their abuse and assault and all the rest of it until they were stopped by imprisonment or death. because for their whole lives they've gotten a free pass. That's the part to remember. Survivors spoke out, and this time they were able to prosecute. Understanding narcissistic abuse is about helping survivors of narcissistic abuse, frankly, of any abuse, find their voice and keep reminding you that these phenomena, they're real, no matter how much people try to minimize it. These news stories may feel like they have nothing to do with us. They have more to do with us than you'd think. They really put a finer point on what narcissistic abuse is. And even though this high-profile case might seem an extreme case of it, the dynamics are exactly the same, no matter what kind of narcissistically abusive relationship we're talking about.